All right, so let's do this. The wall with login and reg, right? So, it looks really straightforward. You log in, you get to the wall, and then you do the stuff that you did on the message board, pretty much, right? So with login and reg, though, it gets a lot more complicated, right? So like I mentioned just a minute ago, I have this starter kit that I kind of worked on last night. It doesn't have any real material in it. It's just a skeleton that connects all of your files together, your front and your back, right? So before I start working on it, though, I want to give you guys like the grand tour of what I have in here already, so you have an idea. So I'm gonna copy this. I'm gonna just paste this, and this is like a template, so I can copy it. I don't want to edit this one because maybe I want to use it later, right? So this is a copy of that. I'm just gonna copy all of these guys and put it in here. I'm gonna rename this. Wall demo with login. All right. So let's take a look at what we have in here. So we have these folders, Bower components, node modules. You know what these are, so I'm not going to go through that. We have the client folder with all our client stuff, and we have our server folder with all our server stuff. Before we get into that, we have a package.json, login and registration, full mean assignment. Cool. We have all these dependencies, bcrypt, body parser, colors, express, mongoose. And then, of course, we have our server.js. The basic rundown, requiring stuff, the setup, database, routes, and then at the end we have our listen here. So if we run the project, first, don't forget that. Boom, our server's up and running, okay? Now, if we go to localhost 9000, we see that it's working. We see this page here, and I'm going to go over what this is later, how it got to this point. But this is basically my starter kit here, right? So on the server side, we have our 3 folders: config, controllers, models. In our config, we have our mongoose.js, which is the basic, this is the thing that you would copy and paste. Also, the only thing that would change in this file is, one, don't forget to add this, mongoose.promise equal global.promise. This was a new thing that, the later versions have this problem. If you don't add that, it's going to give you that error message in the server terminal, right? This one is which database you're connecting to. So yesterday when I was building this, I had this login and reg database, but we can make a new database and call it login and reg wall demo, like that. Okay, so if I put a new database in here like that, and it does not already exist on my computer, as soon as I start saving things, it'll create the database automatically for me. Otherwise, you won't see it, right? It only works when you start adding things in there. And this up to here is basically an algorithm to grab everything in your models and require it. So no matter how many models I have, how many files I have, this will always just go through all of them. It's like automatic. So you don't have to keep track of how many models you have, right? So this is the code for that. These should not change in your projects, with the exception of this database name, all right? So that's mongoose.js. We're done with this. Look at our routes, very basic routes. We're requiring the controller, the user's controller, because we're going to be using the functions, the methods on the user controller in our routes, right? So right here, this might change. I just have this dummy route here when you go to users, it's going to run the index method on the user's controller, right? Nothing new, just very basic setup. So in our controllers, we have, well, let's look at our models first, right? We have a user model. First thing you do in the model, always, can require Mongoose. The second thing you're likely going to do is create your schemas, right? Since this is the user model, we're going to create our user schema. Right now, all I have is a name. And I don't have any validations here. We're going to add that in. But as you can see, it's really simple. Timestamps true will just give you the created at, updated at. After you build out your user schema, you're going to set up the schema inside of your Mongoose model, right? So this should be user. So this is what allows this stuff to be read by Mongoose, so that when you want to use that later on some other file, you can get it. Otherwise, it doesn't know. This part is kind of like requiring it, loading it, and this part is like executing it. It's actually making it do the thing. All right. So let's take a look at our controllers. Controllers requiring Mongoose. This is where we require our model, right? The counterpart for this, because we set it up, now we can get it. Once we get it, we can put it inside of a variable, and then we can use this variable to do all the good stuff that Mongoose allows us to do, right? So yeah, in our controller, we have an index method that doesn't really do anything. In the routes, you can see we're calling that method right here, but right now it's empty. And this is what you want for your starter kits. Just have it there, have one of it, and then later on you can copy and paste that to make other ones. That is it for the server side so far. So we're going to go ahead and close all these guys. We're going to open up the client side. Client, you have your index.html, right? This is the entire file. We have our CSS that we require in. That's going to be in the static CSS, index.css. And that's the header, the green bar that you see. In the index, you also have your Angular and your Angular route. And these guys are being required from this Bower components. And the reason why I can just require this like that without anything in front is because in my server.js, I have this line. I'm using the static folder Bower components that lives on this current directory, which is what this dot means, and relative to this server.js file. So this directory where the server.js file lives, I'm going to go in the same place and look for a Bower components directory. That is where I'm going to be requiring some static things. All right, so if I have this set up, I can just do Bower install Angular route, and in my index, I can go ahead and require it like so, and it'll work. Question?
So if you wanted to kind of factor out the Angular script, would you also write a path to that, or would you just source that in the same directory?
Well, this is for Bower specifically. Right. If you're requiring from Bower, this would be the route, the path.
But the script after that, where you actually write Angular script?
Yeah, this.
Oh.
I'll get to that. Oh. Right. So there's two places I'm requiring things from. The first place is going to be client. The second place is Bower component. Right, so I can request static files from either of these things, right? So these guys, just for simplicity, I've added the Bower static file, because if I'm going to install things via Bower, I want to just be able to require it easily from that Bower components folder, right? So after I do that, and this has to be in this order, right? You have to require Angular first, then Angular route, and then you can start making your Angular stuff. Otherwise, you'll not be able to access this variable, okay? So after I'm done with that, I go down here, and basically I'm creating a very basic Angular app, right? Create the Angular app here, configure the Angular routes, some basic routes here. These guys are going to be found in the partials, which are in the client static partials. these are two different HTML files. And as you can see, the only thing I have in here is just this login and this wall, so that I know that I indeed have loaded that partial, right? Something to remember is that when you guys have partial HTML files, you don't need to put in all of the bells and whistles for the HTML thing, the doc type and all that. You're not gonna need it, because what happens is when you load up these partials, they're gonna load up in here. Like literally, the HTML is gonna be copied from whatever it is here, and it's gonna be dumped in between this tag. So imagine if you had a bunch of HTML tags inside of that div. That would be bad, right? So what we really need is just some vanilla HTML elements, the things that you want to display in those partials, and it'll be loaded up in the ngView div. Okay. So this header thing, I thought about it. I don't really need that. All I really need is just this partial, because in your if you have bigger projects, you want to have a header or something like that that's consistent, that's always on the top, and then you want to load up your partials under it, so that the header will have like this menu bar or something like that that will navigate between different partials. But we can totally put that in the partial itself, right, if we want to change it. So for the sake of this demo, we don't need the header. We can go in our let's see, CSS, get rid of this header stuff. This was just to make sure that the CSS is connected, right? So I see that it was green. Right, so we create our Angular app, and then we create our, the factory and controllers directories, and we will require them inside of our project. So as you can see here, we have this in the static folder. We have JavaScript, controllers, factories. We're very bare bones minimum. Just make the login controller, make the wall controller, factories, just login factory. This is the stuff that you're going to need for it to return this object. And we are done with the starter kit. And that's pretty much all there is, right? It's our job to go in and edit this and fill in the blanks. You have a good kind of template to kind of start working on any project, right? So any questions with this so far before we start adding stuff to it? I just needed that pause because I'm taking a sip of coffee. All right. So what do we do? We're going to start working on the wall. What are we going to need? A wall. So when you start on a project, yes, we're going to need a wall, but today we're not going to build a wall. We're going to build our, entryway into the wall. Yes. So when you start on a project, where do you start? What is the first thing you think of building? Do you build the front end first? Do you build the back end first? What do you do? Where do you start? Where have you guys been starting?
Start with HTML.
HTML?
The front end.
The front end? You like starting with the front end?
Like the database.
I would start with the database. I would start with the model, right? Because the model, once it's there, it's not really going to change that much. And it's kind of like the anchor of how you're going to build your front end, right? You're going to have to match those data that you define. So why don't we get rid of all this stuff? We're not going to need it. Let's go into server models, user.js. This guy, right? So, we have the wall. Obviously, the way that the wireframe was defined to us, all we need is the name, right? But in addition to name, I kind of want email, password, and that's I'm not going to put in birthday. That's just overkill, right?
That'll be on the exam.
Yeah, it might be. Email. It's going to be string, password, string as well. Okay. Now, if we go and look at this, the login and reg section here, we have over here our custom validations. So we want to be able to write these validations in our backend to give us, an error if the validation indeed does not pass. So the way I wrote it here, this technically can be considered a validation, because if you give the name a number, it's going to give you an error. it's going to say that, oh, the data type doesn't match. That's a very basic validation, right? So, if we want more complex validations, we're going to have to pass it an object instead of just this singular, data structure, definition. So the way you would do that is, you would pass it the object. And there's a bunch of different, validators. You can make it require true, trim, meaning that it just gets rid of the white space, before and after. You can write your custom validations, which are like that. And using this regex here, it's going to return you, it's going to pass in the thing that is going to be saved in this, in this column here. And it's going to run the validation on it, and it's going to return either true or false if it did or did not pass this validation. And if it did not pass the validation, it's going to give you an error with this message that you define, right? If it does pass, if it's true, then you're free to move on. So there's built-in validations, and there's also custom ones that you can make. And the custom validation is a good one to use for email, right? We want to have it be a valid email address, meaning that there's some kind of string at some kind of string.com, right? So let's say for the name, we're just going to have it be, the type is going to be string, the required is going to be true, and the min length is going to be 3, like that. Now for the email, we're going to write some custom ones. So the type is going to be string. Yeah. So this one is going to be a little long, so I'm going to put it on the side here, like that. So maybe we can move this up. Yeah. There we go. So type string, required true. And we're going to add our custom validation for emails. Okay? So type string validate. This is the syntax we're going to use to make sure that this is indeed a valid email. So once we're going to fix up this later, this is for the phone number, but once this is done, we can go ahead and close this object here, which is closed like that. Okay. Then you have your password, which is going to be the same as this. And maybe min length, I want to make it 4. Right? No requirements. We can add our custom validation for password as well to make sure there's a number, there's a, whatever. Before, for this demo, we're just not going to do it. We're going to do it here in the email. Now, I have no idea what the regex is to validate an email. So what do you do if you don't know something? Yeah. There we go. So we see here, ooh, a lot of people think this is good. So we're gonna, this is the function that validates the email, right? So you're passing in an email, you're running the regex on the email, and you're returning true or false if it indeed is passing this regex. So really what we need is this part. We're gonna copy that, we're just gonna put it in here, and instead of number, they use the variable called email, right? Because it has to match this guy. So this will return us true or false if it is an email. And if it's not an email, we can say, hey, this value is not a valid email. Like that. Okay. So we have our validations all hooked up. And that's going to be it for our model, right? Unless we want to add more stuff in here, but I think this is good. We're done with our model now. So let's go ahead and make our front end. Let's go ahead and make our login and registration forms. And then as we do that, we can start building out the HTML and connect it to our controllers, and then connect it to our factories. And then we can make some requests to our backend. And once we make those requests, we're going to console log things on our backend to see if indeed we did get that or not. And then once we do, we can look at what kind of data we got. And then we can start building out our controllers to handle it. Okay, that's the kind of flow I like to do. But the first thing is getting this models done, because you want to start in the very beginning. You want to think about what kind of data you're trying to, you're trying to save, right? Okay.
Think of a loose bracket after validate.
Ooh, okay, good catch. Yeah. So it turns out that this is an array. And the first argument is this one, and the second argument is this message. It's a good catch, good catch. All right. So let's go ahead and look at our client, our partials for this login and reg page. And I'm also going to need some CSS. Like that. All right, let's see if we can separate this guy out. Cool. All right, so we got our login and reg page here. And if we reload the page, we should see that, this page is just the partial that's being loaded, right? So here, let's add, let's say, h1, login and reg page. h1. In here, we want a registration form and we want a login form, right? So I think the first one should be the registration form, because you need to register before you can log in, right? So let's go ahead and make a div. We're going to call this reg. In the div, we're going to have a form, but because we're using Angular, we don't need forms. We just need inputs, right? So to test that this is working, let's make let's say h3, and we're going to put test right here. And if it's working, then I can go to my JavaScript, my controllers, my login controller, and here, scope.test equals to hello world. That. If we load the page, we should see hello world. So it's hooked up. The reason it's hooked up to the login controller is because when I define my routes here, this partial login reg.html, the controller for it is going to be login controller. I define it over here, so I don't have to define it in my partial. Okay. So we got this guy's working in our registration div. We're going to have let's have a h4 register. We're going to have a label, or label. In the label, I'm going to have name, and then I'm going to have an input. In the input, we're going to have, it's a type text. The name I do not need, or I'll just leave it like that. Value don't need. What I do need is ng model. Ng model is going to be reg.name, like that. We can move our CSS over here. I'm going to need another input for email, reg.email. I'm going to need another one for password, reg.password. And I'm going to need another one for reg.password, confirm password. So password underscore confirm. Okay. Now we have these four, and we're going to have a button that handles the submission of this registration form, right? So register, and the button is going to be connected to ngClick equals to, reg user. Now, the first time I made this yesterday, I named this guy reg, right? Because I was lazy and you're registering. But then I got this problem where it doesn't know if I'm calling this function or if I'm calling this scope variable, because they're all scope variables. They're named the same thing. So this one should be called reg user, like that. Now in my controllers, every time you lay down an ngClick, if it's not already defined, you want to immediately go to the controller and define that, so you don't forget about it later, right? So scope dot reg user, or no, that's not how you do it. This guy is a method, so your equals to function. That's how you do it, right? So reg user. As soon as I click on reg user, I want you to console log scope.reg. That should be an object that the person has filled in. All right. Now, after you do that, I want you to, over here, I'm going to write some pseudocode. Go to, call factory method to register user. And then I'm going to clear input. And the way you clear the input is you just do scope.reg equals to empty object again, so that the input is cleared, right? Now, let's go ahead and take a look at what we got. Yay! Got the name, got the email, password, register. Boom! We have our, our objects, all good. But look at that. You can see my password. That's not good, right? That's not secure. Now, the only thing I got to do, and this is another one of those moments with the salt sprinkle thing, you just change the type to password instead of text. Now look, when I type in password, it's hidden, right? It's automatic. We can register, we can still see the passwords in our objects. But notice how if we don't have these things, if these are empty, the object is going to be empty. See, that's not good, right? So we got to do some front-end validations to take care of that. Now, I don't think, in Angular, there's a lot of built-in validations for you. You can also do those validations on your controller manually if you want to. You can say, hey, if scope.reg.name is undefined, send this error, right? So those are the front-end validations. Okay, so we're not going to go into that right now. Maybe we'll add it in tomorrow if we have time, right? But right now I'm kind of assuming that this is all good. We're going to get some data that is legit. Now, let's make it presentable so that we can actually make another login part and it looks nice. So we're going to go into our CSS. We got our login reg HTML here. Let's say I want .reg to be display inline block. I want the outline to be 1 pixel solid blue. I want you to have a margin of 40 pixels and a padding of 40 pixels. And I want the labels to be display block, so they take up the whole row. I want the inputs to be display inline block, and I want everything to be text align right, like that. And I want to give these labels some room to breathe. So we're going to make U margin bottom 20 pixels, or 10, or 15 pixels. There. So now if we take a look, boom, look at that. You know, good, looking good. So we can go ahead and make our login form just like this, but with a login. So we're just going to copy all this stuff because we already did all this work. We're not going to redo all of it. We're going to make this guy class login. This is going to be called login. Oops. We're only going to need the email and password, so we can go ahead and get rid of this guy. We can go ahead and get rid of this guy. This one is going to be called login.email and login.password. And this button is going to be login user. And this one is going to be log in. Right? So all of this stuff is going to be the same. Log in, except I want you to be green. Okay. Take a look. Yay, we got register login. Now we want these guys to be text, what is it? Or what is it? Display in the block. Online. Yes, yes. I think I had brain fart there. Top. There we go. Now, yay, that's what we got. All right. Now, we created this login user method, but we don't have it in our controllers. So let's go ahead and make that. Login user scope.login. Call factory method to login in user. Scope.login. It's going to be empty object. Cool. So it looks like our controller so far, it's looking good. You know, let's start building out our factory. Now we're going to call the factory method to register a user, but before we can call the factory method, we have to actually have the factory required in, or injected in, right? Dependency injection. So let's take a look at our factory. It's called the login factory. Now copy that name. We're going to just put it here as an argument, login factory. And now we can call methods on it. So login factory dot register. I'm going to run this function. I'm going to be passing in this data as my first argument, and I'm going to actually pass in a callback function to be run after the factory is done doing this job. So this is the callback function, and the callback function is going to take in an argument, which is going to be the output. This is a good name because that is the data I'm getting back from my database, and I'm just going to console log this output. And I'm also going to console log back from the factory, finished, register. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing here for the login. Login, output, back from factory, finished, login. There we go. Now, in our factory, we got to make these methods, register and login. So we're going to create or register method factory dot register equals to function that takes in those two arguments that I defined before. The first one is going to be the data. Second one is, or I'm going to call this input because to match my output. Input and the callback. Now, I'm going to run the HTTP method to make that request. And that HTTP method will have a callback as well. That will be run. And then I'm going to run the callback in that callback. Right? It's like, yo dog, I heard you like callbacks. So I'm going to put a callback in your callback to make you call back your callback. Right? So the way we do that is HTTP dot, is it a get or a post?
Post.
Post. I'm sending data. The route is going to be, let's say /reg. The data is going to be the input. Dot then function, this is the callback, output, and inside of here, I'm going to console log we made it back. And then we are going to run the callback, pass back the output to my controller. Okay? So we're going to do the same thing for login. Login method, factory, login, input, callback, post. This time it's going to go to login. Then we made it back, callback output, right? So it looks like the factories are hooked up. Now, it's going to go do this. And in my routes on my server side, it's going to be the other end of this call. We're going to send it and we're going to receive it in our routes. So here we have a users one, which was the dummy data that we put in earlier. We're going to rename this to reg. And then this method, we'll call it reg. And over here, we're going to have another one, and this is a post. Over here, we're going to have another one called login, like that. This guy is going to run the method, controller method, login. Now, in our controllers, users.js, we need to write those methods in reg. Login. These are the two functions, all right? All right. So, in order to test that everything works, the easiest way to do it is just to console log in the reg function or method user controller, like that. And this is what I like to do. And I like to make it another color, and blue is usually like the color I use for just general system messages. Here we can do in the reg login method users controller, and we can console log the rec.body to see if we indeed got this data. All right. Now, let's take a look. Let's see if it works. So, I'm going to make these guys side by side. And we're going to see this thing in action. All right. I'm going to make this original. So, if everything's working correctly, then I can send over some stuff. And I should be able to see it in here when I, yeah. So it went over. So this guy was console logged in the controller. It went to the factory. The factory made the request to the backend. And now, look at that. In the reg method users controller. All right, maybe that's not a good color. We can make this guy magenta or cyan. There's a handful of these colors that I can only remember like a few of them. So cyan. Now let's do this again. Boom. See, that's a better color. In the reg method, the user's controller, and we're logging this data that we got. All right. Now, let's think about this logic here. Now that we know everything is hooked up and it's working correctly, I'm getting the data through, and it's in the registration method. Let's see if the login method works. Boom. In the login method, user's controller. Oops, look at that. There's no data. Why is there no data? Ah, I think I know why. Do you guys know why?
And what is that?
I was sending the registration data to the login form. So now, this should be going through. Yeah, it's going through, right? So, everything worked really well without any, problems. Typically, we want to generate some problems there to.
Controller, we have like loginFactory, register, scope, and reg.
Mhm. Yours is not working. Make sure that you change this one to reg, to login. Before I just copied and pasted all this stuff and I forgot to change this one. So that's why I was not getting any data back. But moving on, right? We have this data in our backend now, in our controller method, in our server side. So we're gonna have to do something with this and then return back a response. Okay, so for registration, what do I need to do first?
Validate.
Well, the validation will do it on its own, right? And for this controller.js, before I do this loginFactory stuff, I'm just gonna make a very simple kind of validation to make sure that the passwords match, right? So if scope.reg dot password equals to the scope.reg dot password underscore confirm, then I want to do this. Otherwise, I'm going to create a new variable and I'm going to set this scope.error equals to password do not match, like that. And in my partial, I can have this guy be the error, right? And in here, I can have my H3s be red, like that. So that if I have an error, it'll display password does not match, right? And you notice that the backend didn't receive that data because it did not pass my front end validation, right? That's just one simple validation I can do on the front end. There's many more that you can play around with later. It's gonna take a lot of time, to kind of just to get all the bells and whistles going. So let's do, this is the only, in the register is the only part where I need to check for the passwords to match, right? So when I get to the back end, I'm assuming that the passwords match already. So here, in my my reg function, if a user is registering, I'm going to have to find if he's already registered or not, right? That's the first step. If your email is already registered, then you cannot do it again. So we can go ahead and do our user.find1. First argument is going to be what I'm searching for. So email is going to be rec.body.email. And second thing is the function with some errors, and then the user, this one user that I'm getting, right? So in here, in Mongoose function, if I have errors, I'm going to console log error. And I'm going to make this .red because that's really bad. Now, there are no errors. Then there's two possibilities, right? Possibility one is no email or no user was found because the email did not match anything in my database. Now, possibility two is user was found. Now, I guess we can switch these guys around. Going from that fail fast kind of philosophy, if a user was found, that's bad. If a user was not found, that's good. We can register them. So if a user was found, if one user, that means the user was found. I'm going to console log. Just going to copy this here. User was found. And we're going to make this guy yellow because it's not necessarily a really catastrophic error, but I want to be able to see it, that it was found. Now, else wasn't found, then I can go ahead and log user is good to go, to register, like that. Right? We can make this guy green. Now,
It's a routes file.
Hmm?
The routes file.
in the routes file, you want to see the routes file? Yeah, post register, reg, post login. Those are the two routes that are gonna get me to this guy or the login one. Right, so we're doing this one first. Now, if the user was found, I'm going to send back response.json. And in the response, and there's many ways you can do this, by the way. This is just a very quick and dirty way to do it. We're going to res.json the error. The error message is going to say, you know, this email or email is already registered. Please log in instead. I don't know why I capitalized that. Okay. And that'll be the end of it if the user was found. Now, the user wasn't found, I'm going to have to do the business of registering the user. Right? So, before I get to this though, I want to make sure that this works. And now, since we don't have anything in our database, this is always going to be triggered. So, if this indeed is triggered, I want to see what I get back in my front end. So I can put that message up here. Right? So, say name, email, password, boom. User is good to register. Okay, well, I guess this will always trigger because right now I have no users. We'll test this out later. But Okay, user is good to register. How do we register a user? Var user equals to new user, right? And in here, we're going to add the objects. There's a name. That's going to be .body.name. There's going to be an email, which is the rec.body.email. There's going to be password. rec.body.password, like that. And that's all we need. Those three things. Over here, we're going to go ahead and do, let's move this over. We're going to do user.save if they're in the callback function, if there's an error, we're going to log error when certain. And if there is no error, we're going to go ahead and console log successfully registered a new user, like that. And we're going to res.json this user that I just made. All right. So here is create the user object and save into database. So now we should be done with this register function here. Okay, so here is my register function. Now, let's take a look. In our factories, when we get back the JSON data, it's going to console log we made it back. It's going to run the callback with the output, which will take us to our controller. And the output will now be logged in the console, and it'll say back from the factory, finished register. Register. That. Okay. Now, let's see if we indeed see this when we go and register. So boom. User is good to register, successfully registered a user. Over here, we have back from the factory, finished. We made it back. That's the object that we got back. See what we got back. We have status 200 data is the user that was sent back in the res.json. So over here, really the valuable thing is this, the data, right? So over here, we can have, for instance, we can make, scope.user equals to this object. And here, we can say scope.user is equal to output.data, right? Now, if we do that, we can go in our partial and we can go ahead and display our user up here. Let's see, H5. Or let's make it. So I made a scope.user scope property here, set it to empty object. When I get back this output, I'm just going to set the output.data to the scope.user so that I can see in my partial what that object is, right? So I don't have to dig into the console log to see it. So say let's password root. So boom, that's the data. That's the user that I got back, so I can see it. Okay. Now, when I successfully register and I see that, I should probably save this data somewhere, right? Because the user is logged in and he's registered in effect, right? Now, where would we save that? So we got to save this data somewhere, and then we got to go to the wall, right? And the wall is sitting on another partial, and that partial is connected to another controller, which is the wall controller. So what I got to do at this point, I'm getting this data back, and I'm going to have to go save it in the factory. Once that's done, I'm going to go and transition to the wall partial. And then from the wall partial, when it loads, it's going to load the wall controller. And when the wall controller loads, it's going to go to my factory again, and it's going to grab the data that was saved from this controller. And I'm going to display that on the wall, like welcome, whoever, right? So, as you can see, it is kind of getting, a little bit convoluted. That's why this is a two-part video. And we haven't even done login yet. But, let's make this work so that later on when we do the login, it's much easier to just add it onto that. Okay. So here, I'm going to have to run. If I'm going to save something to the factory, I'm going to have to set it. I'm going to call the factory method, right? So login factory dot set user. Run this. I'm going to be passing in this output.data. Because I don't really need this scope.user, I can get rid of it later. So output.data is the thing I'm going to actually need. I'm going to pass that in, and then I'm going to pass a callback function. This guy is not going to take in any arguments, and all I'm going to do in this callback is do the location thing, right? So in order to do that, I need to inject that dependency, location, and here it's location dot like that, right? Let's go take a look. Yeah, I don't really remember it, but it's in the Angular chapter, Angular routes, location, location.url, like that. So location.url, and I'm going to the wall, right? Now this route was defined in my index over here, so that when I go to that location, it's going to load up this partial, the wall.html, and it's going to load up this wall controller here in my controllers down here, wall controller. So as soon as I get this, I can say in the wall controller. It's going to console log that, so I know I'm using this controller now. Now, we called this factory method, so we have to go ahead and make this factory method. Factories, let's make that method. This is setter for user object. Now, if we're going to have a user object, we've got to make that variable. Now, dot, what did I call this? Set user. Set user equals to function, the data, and the callback. Now, I'm going to reference this variable here, user equals to this data that was passed in, and then I'm going to run the callback. And there's nothing passed back, so that's all I need. Okay. Now when the callback runs, it's going to go ahead and run this, and it's going to take me to this guy, and it's going to load up this wall.html here, and it'll say wall. Okay. Now let's see if that indeed is what happens. So say Kevin. Oop, that's already taken. Root, register. Boom, wall. There we go. He's logged in, right? Because he's logged in, we should probably get his data and display it here.
Register thing, right?
Huh?
It was through your register?
Yeah, but he registered, so he was logged in,
Okay, gotcha.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's register and login. They're like exactly the same, except that for register,
You gotta validate and
yeah, you're just saving it first, and
Right.
then you're getting, after you save it, you're getting that data back.
okay.
Right. So, and there's no need for you to verify the password, because when they register, the password is the password. That is the thing you're setting, right? Am I not making sense?
No, it's just like because in Python you had to, when they register, they have to go back and then log in.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that, and I mean, some companies or some people will say that that's the best way to go about it. For the thing that we're doing now, like that's overkill, right? There's really no need for you to do that. So make it easy for your user, right? All right. So in our wall controller, all we're going to be doing is getting that user data back from the factory. So I'm going to have to inject the dependency and then call the factory method for the getter. So get user. Not going to pass anything in except for this callback function. And I'm going to set a scope.user equals empty object, and I'm going to set this data to be that scope.user. So I get this back from the factory, and I'm just going to stuff it in this scope.user variable. So now in my wall, I can say hello user.name, and do the greeting. So hello, that's it. And here is going to be the wall stuff, right? So wall stuff goes here. Comment that out, and we'll add this in tomorrow. All right. So, but right now we want to be able to display the username when we get to this page. Now we're going to have to write this getter method in our factory. So we're going to just copy this guy and do the getter for user object. It's going to be get user. All it takes in is the callback, and we are just going to run the callback and return user. Because we set it, now we can just get it and return it, right? So that's going to work. Let's just do a quick test. Boom. Hello, Eduardo. Right? So that works. Our register method is pretty much done. All we got to do now is just hook up the logins, right? So for login, we're sending an email and we're sending a password, right? In the login method users controller. So let's go ahead and write our logic to handle that. So users here. So now we're in here and we're going to log this guy in, right? Now, what are the kind of steps we're going to have to take, right? Pseudocode. So we're going to, first of all, we're going to take the email in the rect body and we're going to look for that user. Yes. So find the user with the email. And then once we do find the user, we're going to check the password to see if it matches, right? So authenticate password. And those are really the only two steps. So let's go ahead and write it. User, well, we can just copy this. this, rect.body function, close that guy, close that guy. We're going to find this user. If error, we are going to console log there's an error. Else, we are going to, there's going to be two cases again, right? There's going to be two cases. User was found, no user was found. Now, if we can copy this guy over here, because we have our handy little console logs. So if the user was found, then we can continue on with, actually, we're going to make it if the user was not found, like that. Because this is the part where it's not good. So user was not found, and then we're going to res.json with the error. So user is, well, email is not registered. Please register instead. There we go. And then if the user was found, then we can continue on with our authentication. So this one will go here. And here we are going to say checking password. Okay. So how do we check a password? It's just to see if, if this one user dot password equals to rec.body dot password, then we're good to go. Else, you're not authenticated. So we gotta kick you out. We gotta res.json this error message to say that password incorrect. Like that. Now, if you are indeed correct, then we're just gonna, console log successfully logged in a user. Logged in a user, and we're gonna res.json the user. Yeah, like that. Okay, so that's all we need for the login. And now, once we do res.json, it's going to go to the factory. It's going to go back to the login method. It's going to say we made it back. It's going to do the callback and spit back the output to this controller. It's going to be this one, right? This is the output that's going to get we're going to get back. And we're just going to do the exact same thing that we did for the register in here. So it's the exact same actions. So we got this data back in factory finish login, and then we're just going to run this loginFactory method, the setter method again, and then we're going to redirect to the wall after we're done. Exact same thing. Okay, so let's see. Let's check it out. Oops. Users JS73. I must have an extra there. We'll be done in about like 15 minutes.
Okay. We need to have an instructor meeting.
Okay. All right. So let's see if we can log in. Or the email was email@email.com. Password was root. Login. Oops. User is not defined. Users.js68. Users.js68. This is not defined because I called it one user. There. So let's try this again. Or email@email.com root, login, boom, we're logged in, right? Now, if we're, what happens if we're, if we give it the wrong password? So, email at email.com, wrong password. It's still going to the wall. It's still redirecting us to the wall. That's not good, right? So, what can we do? We can say, look in our controller. If we have this res.json with an error on it, that means something's wrong. That's not good. If we don't have the error and we just send back this user object, then everything's fine. So we can just look to see if we have this property called error. If there is an error, then we'll display that error. If there's no error, then we'll log them in, redirect to the wall. Okay. Now, there's really no way for anybody to hack that because you're getting the stuff straight from your server, and it's going to read that and it's going to do the thing. So there's no way for them to kind of bypass this server side, response. So that for general purpose, that's good. It's secure. All right. So in our controllers.js, when we log in, we're getting back some data, right? Now we can say if output dot data dot error, then we can, well, let's take a look at what we got back. Data, yeah, in the data object we have this errors, password incorrect, right? So if we do have an output.data.error, then we can go ahead and set our scope.error to be this error message. Or else, then we do this stuff. And we go and get the person to the wall, right? So this is going to be exactly the same over here on the register side. So if we do get an object back with this error property, we're just going to display that error and nothing else. If there is no error property, then we're going to do the login. We're going to move them over to the wall, and we're going to set this data in our factory. Okay, so let's take a look. Boom, password incorrect. Now if we pass in a weird email, boom, email is not registered. Please register instead, right? So it works. Now, there's a bunch of other stuff you can do to, in the front end and the back end, to validate your data so that it doesn't cause any surprises, right? So right now, we kind of have these basic validations up, but if you're going to be very defensive with your programming, then you're going to write validations for each of these things to make sure they're not empty, they're not invalid, formatting. And then once everything is good to go, you're going to send it back to the database. And in the database, you're going to do that check again to make sure that nobody hacked your thing. I mean, it's not very likely that it's going to trigger the error on the database side because the front-end validations would have caught that. But in the event that somebody wanted to bypass those validations, you still have your backend as that last line of defense, right? And the way you would do that, on the front end, you would obviously, before you send over, stuff, it would be something like this, right? Scope.regPassword equal to scope.reg.passwordConfirm. If that happens, then you will do that. You can add also, and there is indeed a scope.reg.name and all of the other stuff, because you don't want to send back stuff if they're empty, right? So what else do you got? Email. You also have password, like that. So these guys are all there, then we can go ahead and do that stuff, right? That would be a simple front-end validation. In the back end, you can go in your users. Before you actually create this user, before you create this guy, you got to make sure that there is a rec.body.name, there is a rec.body.email, there is a rec.body.password. Otherwise, it'll cause your thing to crash because now you're accessing this property that does not exist, right? So I'm not going to do that here, but you guys should do that later on in your projects. I'm pretty sure on the exam, it's probably not going to be a thing because you're not expected to do login reg on the exam, so that's not going to be a thing. Now we're done, but we got that, that little salt thing. Yeah. So here, let me show you guys something that I like to do, and it's helped me out a lot, and it's called Mongo Chef, right? So Mongo Chef will help you visualize your data so that you can actually see what's going on. Uh-oh. Oh, there we go. So we have this login and reg wall demo. And we see we have our collections with our users. Double click on that. Boom, those are all the users I made, right? So this user is me, email at email, the password is root. Uh-oh. See, the password is just saved in there with the password. And the same for all of these objects too. So if I'm going to encrypt the password, I'm going to be using that bcrypt, that little bcrypt, the little syntax there. And that guy is found over here in full mean, login and reg, this guy, bcrypt, right? So first thing you got to do is make sure that you do indeed have bcrypt. Yes, I already have it as a dependency installed via npm. Before the project even started, it's already there. Now, I'm going to use bcrypt on this page, on the controllers, right? So if I'm going to use it, I'm going to have to require it. So let's see. Yeah, this guy, var bcrypt, require bcrypt.js. Now, I did this yesterday, and it turns out that there is no JS on the end of it, right? That's an error in the platform. Usually when you require things, it's going to match the name that it's in the folder, right? So once we require that, in order to hash a password, this is the only line you need, right? So we're going to copy this line, and instead of saving in this rec.body.password, I'm going to save the encrypted password. So I can create a variable here called pw. I'm going to set that equals to this bcrypt.hasSync, and this is the thing that it's going to encrypt. So here is this rec.body.password, and it's going to encrypt this guy with a generic salt, of 8. I don't know what that means, but it's very secure, right? So now that we have this encrypted, we're going to save this guy in our password field, right? So now that this guy is saved, I'm going to do that in a minute. But in order to now get the authentication from that encryption, I'm going to use this line. And this is a very handy password checker, right? So in our login, this is the line where we check the password, if one password equal to rec.body.password. But we're not going to do it this way. We're going to do it this way. bcrypt.compare password, this.password. And this is going to return you a Boolean, right? So instead of this line here, we're going to use this line here. So we're going to put that in here, like so. And we are comparing these two things. So this thing is going to be the rec.body.password, and the other one is going to be the one I got back from the database, which is oneuser.password, like that. And they're both going to be encrypted, right? This is not encrypted yet, but this line will encrypt this password and compare it to this encrypted password. Okay? Or it's the other way around. They'll decrypt this one and compare it to the raw version of the password. But either way, it's going to give you a true or false to see if they're the same, right? So,
You haven't actually print this yet.
nope,
After.
Yep. that's good. All right, so let's go ahead and test out our hypothesis and see if it works. Now I'm going to register a user. Let's see, Brian, email, hack.com. Register, boom, you're there. Now let's take a look. In here, refresh it, we see this new entry. Oh, look at that. The password is encrypted. See? And now if we're going to authenticate you and try to log you in, if I type in some weird password like that, password incorrect. But if I give you the right password, boom, it's going to be logged in, right? That's how you add your encryption to your database. And really, it's like you build it already without encryption, and it's just like that little sprinkle that just does it for you, right? So it's really easy to do.
It's easier than the last one.
Yeah, right? So it's been an hour and 21 minutes, and it's like taking up 2.11 gigs on my computer. So I'm going to go ahead and end this recording right now.